La cucaracha, la cucaracha, yada-do-yada-do-yada-dum. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am singing about cockroaches. Not because I have them in my temple, which I do, but because we have with us the founder and artistic director of a theater company that for years and years in New York did experimental, exciting, innovative theater called La Cucaracha Theater, and it was run by this man, Richard Caliban, who is still directing, who is still playwriting. As a matter of fact, he has a new show that he is directing called Movies TV Mayhem, which is being done on Theater Row this month into early May. He's also still working on a show that was already done in New York about Leni Riefenstahl, the Nazi documentary maker. All this kind of stuff to talk about for years and years of what he has brought to culture and theater. Won't you please welcome to the neighborhood, Richard Caliban. Shalom, Richard!
Hello.
How you
Quite
doing?
an intro.
Well, it is, right? So, at one point, you described yourself as an old hippie. Are you?
Yeah. Well, did I describe myself as that? I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in that era, so yeah, I still love that era, and I still I mean, that was the greatest time of in many ways, artistically, politically. I mean, a lot of me was formed in that era, so I guess I do tend to think of myself as an old hippie still.
So, considering the ideals of people in the 1960s and so forth, and culturally, a lot of things changed, musically, hairstyles, everything else. And yet, right now, how do you not be disillusioned by the fact that, the hippies took over for a while, and now the world is still a horrible mess?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. How do you not be disillusioned? I guess, I mean, because I feel like what's going on now is a speed bump. In a lot of ways, I feel it's the swan song of a part of I feel like there's a big shift towards a more a different world, and I think a lot of what's going on now is the last gasp of an older sort of era and viewpoint, a more patriarchal society, so it doesn't. I don't feel like, oh my God, we've reached the end. I feel like we're actually. This is the birthing pains of a new transition to something else.
The patriarchy is falling, and pussy will reign at some point. Soon,
Well,
relatively
couldn't
soon,
have
in
put
our
it better
lifetime.
myself.
God willing. Maybe you won't put it like that, but I put it like that. So, can I ask, of all
Yeah.
things to call a New York theater company, back in I guess it was the 1980s, maybe even 70s, La
Yeah.
Cucaracha.
Yeah. Well,
Why? Yeah.
it wasn't actually La
Oh,
Cucaracha. It
sorry.
was just Cucaracha,
Sorry.
and it oddly came for it. Some people thought, oh, we're a Hispanic theater company, but we weren't. We were just an experimental theater company. In fact, the Times called us. We were the most interesting experimental company in the city, which was maybe true for a short period, but anyway. So Cucaracha came from back in the 80s. There were these commercials played on TV and radio where they were like anti-cocaine commercials that Frank Zappa did. And the end of the commercial would end with him saying, rots your mind, rots your body, cucaracha. It was just nonsensical,
Oh,
and it
yeah, yeah.
rhymed. And so I just love that. And so we would, our logo would be CUC, and then below that, uh,
ARA.
ARA, and then
Yeah.
and it was more, so it was kind of, we were just deconstructing the word a bit. So it was in that
It
sense.
didn't mean anything. It wasn't like you were in a building over on
Yeah,
what was Theater Row back. There's still a Theater Row, but they knocked
yeah,
everything down. Or over on East 4th Street that was full of roaches.
right,
No. Or you never had the roaches do a musical with you guys. So yeah, it's just a word. It was a nonsense word, just like Zappa used it. So
yeah,
when you were coming up with, I guess, I don't even know if they used the phrase mission statements back then, but
yeah,
what was the idea of Cucaracha Theater when you devised it?
yeah. Well, I don't. For me, it was I was in love with ensemble theater, which is kind of what I grew up with in Bard College, and I liked. To me, it was and I was very and my exposure to like companies in Europe. That worked together for many years. There's something about people that have worked together for years. Just watching actors like that walk across a rehearsal room together. It's like music. It's like water. You can't buy that in 3 weeks of rehearsal.
Mm.
So I wanted to form a company where I could build a family of collaborators and not have to reinvent the wheel every time I did a play. I wanted to work with the same people and develop a language and a way of working together that could continue on. The trouble is, it was hard in this country because, in Europe, you kind of be in a company and you kind of stay there and you develop with them. And here, it's more about getting to the next job, I guess. So it's a much more mercenary, crazy system, and it was hard to keep. As people got more successful, they would move on to other things. It's very hard to, So experimental theater, avant-garde theater, is generally in this country made up of young people. Like one of the few groups that was making that kind of art into their maturity was like the Wooster Group, but
Oh, yeah.
most of it we had to keep on, we were just keep recycling young actors into the same thing. So I was trying to hold on to my actors and to my designers and collaborators and as much as possible.
And
Uh,
did you have a permanent home, or were you renting?
yeah, no, we had a 10,000 square foot warehouse down in Tribeca. Back when it was, we used to have to put maps on our flyers for people to find it because it
Mm.
was like no man's land down there. And that's why we ended up closing down eventually in the late 90s because suddenly the real estate boom hit Tribeca and, we no longer
So
could
were
be
you
in.
able to use, I mean, that's a huge space. Were you able to
Yeah.
use it and configure it? Did you do experiential theater of like not just even black box, but
Yeah.
audiences walk in and they're surrounded
It
by
was always
cats and
different. We never
yeah.
built an actual, it was, we would set it up differently for every show, basically. Yeah.
Wow. So what are one or two of the most proud moments of your career in terms of writing and directing, of like where you just went, this is what I was meant to do and it came out just the way I wanted it?
Well, never. Yeah. But I mean, I loved that period of like working with, there were, it was always hard, but I think during that period, working Cucaracha was, uh, I felt like, I was writing for particular actors in the company. And I knew the space I was working in, so there was, I felt like, I had most control over all my tools, so to speak, and so that was very fulfilling. It can be harder to, do a play with a bunch of strangers, 3 weeks rehearsal, and thrown up in some theater that you move into 2 days before you go up. I mean, that can be
Yeah, yeah.
frustrating. So I
Sure.
felt like in a lot of ways I could put on stage more of what I was envisioning back.
It's like a Richard Foreman sort of a thing.
Yeah,
You work with,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So let me, in one of your bios, and maybe on your website or something, you said,
Mhm.
okay, so we were this little theater that nobody could find, that we're just throwing all this stuff together, and then somehow you got mentioned in the club scene, and you went from being completely unknown to like the hottest ticket in town for one particular production.
Mhm.
What happened there?
Oh, that was it might be two different things going on
Oh,
there. I had come back from I took a little sabbatical and I was at the Yale Drama School for a bit and I came back and did a show called Famine Plays and we got the voice showed up because we'd been doing this was the first real show we did in the warehouse and before that, we were kind of nomadic, putting up shows in odd spaces and stuff. But and the voice came, and they gave us an Obie as like an emerging company, and we suddenly were on the map. And suddenly, because before that it was usually kind of our friends coming to shows, and then suddenly we were everybody was coming. People we didn't know, we'd put on these fundraisers where we'd have a samba band, and there would be 1,000 people would show up. It was very quickly we went from just being kind of our little dinky company to a big deal.
Might I ask, back then, how much, we're talking like middle of the 1980s. So you would throw a fundraiser and people would donate and so forth.
Yeah.
How much of your operating was ticket sales? How much was fundraising? And how much did you actually get from grants from the government back then when they were funding art?
Yeah. Well, we did a lot more. We probably more so than most companies. We got a lot of our income was illegal, because I mean, we were basically operating like a bar. Because we would always have late night events, performance artists. I mean, you could walk in and see Eric Bogosian on stage at 2 a.m. or stuff, or Blue Man Group before anybody knew who they were. So we always had stuff going on, and we always had a bar that brought us in a ton of money, frankly. But then we got, but we were kind of an organization before we really had an office and an administration to like raise money. So we got that first grant from the Village Voice. We were like, oh, wow, we can set up an office. We can start doing this for real. And then we started getting grants from private organizations and government. But I think it'd be much harder now because there's a lot less, government money available. But most of our money came from private.
From donors, and did you take any heat from like the Giuliani administration because you were dancing and performance with alcohol, or
no? We were completely illegal. We didn't even have a C of O for the. It was an illegal space. You couldn't have people in there. But we would be. I remember one night, a couple cops walked into the place at like 4 a.m. And they walked up to the bar. They had a drink. They didn't question anything. There's sex going on in the corners and drugs, and there's all kinds of insanity going on. And these guys just walked in, kind of like hung out for a bit, and then they left. I mean, today we'd all be arrested, for God's sake.
And you weren't bribing the mob, and you weren't bribing the cops. No, there was nothing under the table.
It was just a different era,
Like, wow. Wow, I should have lived in that era. I don't know where the hell my life was when you were having all this crazy, crazy fun, and still trying to do art. And still, I mean, I don't know what the hell was open at 4 a.m. What kind of show were you? Was Eric Bogosian doing a monologue at 4 a.m.?
Very well could have been, yeah.
So let me ask you also about Blue Man Group, because I thought that, first time I heard of them was Serious Fun at Lincoln Center, but they were already a downtown thing by the time Lincoln Center picked them. What were they doing in the earlier years down at Cucaracha?
Well, we did a summer cabaret where we presented performance artists, and so they came. We booked them, and there were just there were 3 art students. Nobody knew who the hell they were. And they did this crazy piece in a warehouse where I remember they had these paintings on ropes, and they would be painting them, and then they'd swing them out over the audience and stuff. But they were just kind of nerdy art students that, and then then their show happened, we're on, that's still running today. But for many years they'd finish the show, their off-Broadway show, and then they'd pack a bunch of stuff up into a van, and they'd bring it over to Cucaracha late at night, and they'd try out some new stuff there, like their tubes and stuff like that.
But did you realize at that point that it was world-changing, that it was some level of genius going on there, or were they just another bunch of crazy? No,
we definitely knew they were special, but God, nobody knew that they were going to turn into like a worldwide franchise, for God's sakes. Yeah.
So you mentioned Bogosian. Who were some of the other people who cut their teeth, if you will, at Cucaracha?
Oh God! Name just about Ethel Eichelberger, Instant Girl, Urban Bushwoman. I mean, just dozens and dozens of Joey Arias. The list goes on and on and on. David Van Tighem. Not that none of these people cut their teeth at Cucaracha. They were all, a lot of, but they all, but just about everybody in the performance art scene came through Cucaracha at some point, because we did present a whole bunch of them. And then, of course, we were doing plays as well. But, we did a lot of that because it was a great era for that. Everybody was doing, performance art, which I guess is really just a variety act, but we made
Huh.
it sound artsy by calling it performance art.
Well, did it break your heart to close the space when rent was off the wall and it was the 90s? And was it really, or were you already like, it's had its time and I'm directing all these other places? It's all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of me, I mean, because it was, I mean, uh, part of me was a little bit relieved because, yeah, it was a 24-hour a day job, but pipe would break and I'd be there at the middle of the night. And I had little kids and it was, and my whole life was there. So it was hard. That's also, you're also kind of the principal of the high school. It's like you're always stepping on somebody's toes. And so it was just, I felt like I was in the center of a hurricane for years. So it was stressful and hard, also wonderful. So part of me was relieved because I could focus more on my work rather than, running this theater company. But now I miss it. I wish, I wish I'd found a way to have hung on to it and moved it. But I was kind of exhausted at the time. So, uh,
Do new theater companies and budding artistic directors come to you for advice? And when they do, what do you tell them?
well, um, I not for advice, but I remember I was up for a artistic director job by like a regional theater, uh, and they were interested in like reaching a younger, hipper audience, and so and that's what we were kind of famous for. It took me a while to figure that out. I thought it was a liability. I kept apologizing. Well, our audience is kind of young, and I realized everybody else wants a young audience. Uh, but anyway, but some lawyer from their board comes and interviews me, and I just realized there was,
Wasn't gonna, yeah.
there was no connection, and uh, uh, so things that, it's weird, like because a lot of companies start out like we did, crazy bunch of kids put on plays, and before you know it, you become a theater company. But then if you can, and probably would have happened to Cucaracha to an extent too, as you continue and there's more money involved, and then suddenly you got boards and you got, people on there who were, not quite there's something solidifies and becomes a little, you lose something of, you kind of become the thing that you thought you were replacing in the first place.
That's right. Yeah. As soon as you hit 30, don't trust anyone. That's kind of the
Yeah.
idea.
Suddenly
But
people are getting paid more, and
yeah.
there's like, we have it's all it's anyway.
And
So
but
in some ways, maybe it's good that it died when it did, because it was always kind of it was a crazy place. It was never became an institution.
well, people were stooping at 3 a.m. in the corners. That's very, you don't get that Irish repertory.
You
You
can't
don't even
beat.
see that at Theater for the New City. Maybe some necking at Theater for the New City on a Sunday morning. They get in there before a show goes on. But you don't get the stooping and the drugs, at the roundabout. It just doesn't happen,
No.
as far as I know anyway. But we're talking with Richard Caliban, who is a playwright and director. We want to make sure that people know that you are directing a play. It's called Movies, TV, Mayhem by
Yes.
a playwright named Dean Coucher. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's at
Yes.
Theater Row. Which theater in Theater Row? Is it the Theater Row Theater or is it one of the inside things?
It's I think it used to be the Harold
Oh, the
Clurman,
Clark?
but I may be wrong about that. Anyway, it's in the basement. There are two large spaces, so it's about the size of like say the classic stage. It's very high. It's really beautiful space. I love it. Uh, so yeah, so we have a lot of resources there to work with. It doesn't feel like we're in a cramped little black box theater.
So, and it's running from now through May 9th. But please tell us, what is it?
Yeah. Well, Dean is a very well-known production designer. Worked like on shows like The Sopranos, Miami Vice, movies like Sophie's Choice. He had a long career as a production designer in film and TV. And so this basically kind of a collection of stories of crazy things from his career.
Oh.
Stories about all different aspects of the behind the scenes making of shows. Uh, so
And with visuals to complement, I assume it's designed in a certain way. It isn't just a monologue, or is it? What is it?
No, well, that was the challenge. It is a lot of storytelling, so how to make that exciting and that's for me. That was as a director coming in. That was the challenge: how to make that theatrical and visually interesting and whatnot. So, which we've done. It's yes, it's full of music. It's full of projections. It's very engaging, very theatrical, and
So can you give us a little taste? Like, what's a story that he tells in the show about some production near disaster or actual disaster or, surprising element of movies, TV mayhem of his design career?
Well, it's not about him. Most of the stories don't involve him.
Oh,
They're basically the premise is that there's these three actors who put on a podcast called Movies, TV, and Mayhem, and they're defining terms for the audience, like about they're defining movie making terms. And so they take turns like getting up and doing these stories, performing them. Like, so there's one, for instance, about this Teamster who drives around Mickey Rourke, and but that's part of his job is, and these are all true stories. And
okay, there, yeah.
it's so one of it is that there's this tension between like the LA surfer dude crew and the New York sort of mafia type Teamsters, and how this guy goes, how his brother is like, a serious mafioso kind of guy, and like he comes home and there's a head in his freezer, stuff like that. So it's all these.
Wait, true story?
Yeah, yeah.
A human head?
Yes.
All right, I need to see this play. Oh my God, that's just whoa! I thought he'd just be telling a couple of things about key grips and Best Boys.
Yes, well, there's plenty of that too. But
good. I love Best Boys. I do. Something about Best Boys just makes me so happy. Our best boy right now is Richard Caliban. We're talking with him. He is the best boy to see because he's directing this particular play right now. Off-Broadway. Theater Row happens to be between 9th and 10th Avenue over in Midtown Manhattan. But you've also got another play that you did in New York already, over in Brooklyn, and you've done it in other places. It's coming to Seattle in October, which is not that far away. And oh boy, I got to hear about this one, I don't know if you know this, but I'm Jewish. So there's a play about the German directress Leni Riefenstahl, who made a little happy movie called Triumph of the Will, which was a 2-hour Nazi commercial. So, and she also did the Olympiad, which was also a 2-hour Nazi commercial. So, Jesse Owens aside. But tell us, please, about the Leni Riefenstahl show.
Yeah. Yes, well, this one's written by Gil Kaufman. And it stars an actress I've collaborated with a lot over the years, Jody Markell, who won an Obie years ago for a play called Machinal that she starred in that was at the Public Theater. So this it's Leni Riefenstahl basically trying to re-edit her. It's like her from the sort of a state of limbo. She lived to be 101, but in this
because only the good die young.
Yes, in this play, she's kind of speaking from after death, and it's in the premises say she's kind of like trying to re-edit her life to create the impression to forgive her, not to forgive,
to explain
herself.
Yeah,
because her story was always, look, I was just an artist, So, and she never got convicted of anything. She and yet she did more to promote Nazism than anybody. But
not more than Goebbels, but she was up there, yeah.
Well, just in terms of advertising power, she was. Yeah. I mean, she was the greatest advertiser there was for that. And there's all these photos. She was buddies with them all, hanging out with Hitler and the boys, and right, all right in the, and yet she tried to, pretend that she had no knowledge of this and it wasn't political. She was just an artist doing her work. So she's a very fascinating character in that way. And she was an innovative filmmaker. A lot of people embrace her as sort of a feminist figure because during she was did a lot of interesting stuff in theater when in film when most women weren't even allowed to direct anything. And so she's a complicated figure, and also very so we're really getting at her, like trying to come to wrestling with her guilt.
Sure.
uh,
But also the question is, so there have been documentaries about her and interviews, but how is the play tackling the subject of Leni Riefenstahl? How do they tell the story? Is it a monologue also, or what is it?
it's a one-woman show.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So it's her basically, treating the audience almost as like, the jury, and her, she's trying to explain, like, oh, you would have loved Hitler. I mean, before the power got to his head, stuff like that. And also there's a section where she's kind of, she's trying to use the audience, she wants to re-edit her film. So she wants to take pictures of the audience and she tosses out, but she wants them to look happy, not, and she tosses out swastika armbands to the audience, and it's always interesting, like, in real, in some places people actually will put them on.
Oh, sure. All right,
And
yeah.
so it's about this pressure of like, will they cooperate with her or not? Which is kind of, so she's trying to explain, like, that's what it was like, back then. Everybody went along with it because we didn't know.
Well, let's just hope the audience members take off the bands after they leave the theater. Actually, in this climate, they can keep them on.
Yeah. Well, in some
all
places,
the Palestinians will be like, yeah,
No, and sometimes we've actually lost a few, so somebody's taking them home every once in a while.
Maybe American Indians. They see the thing as like, oh no, it's not that similar at all. It's
The spiders. Yeah.
It's a good one, yeah. So, but let me also ask, because we haven't gotten that much into your life. We've been talking so much about your work. Did you, when you were younger, actually live in a rainforest?
Wow, where are you reading this? Huh?
I made it up completely.
Yeah,
I just I pull things from the Bible.
I have no idea what you're talking about. No, I did. Well, I don't know where that story appeared, but yeah, I did for a while. I lived, I was living in Puerto Rico when I was a kid, and I quit college, and I built a little house I used to do some construction work and stuff for this family that was pretty wealthy, and they had a place up in the rainforest. And I basically asked him if can I build a house on your property? And they let me. And so I built this little house on stilts. And, I remember you could, like, there was a bathroom. You could, like, be taking a shower and pick, like, leaves from the trees. Anyway, so that was my hippie days. I quit college and I was going to start a commune down there, and I wanted to go sailing around the world with my buddies. But anyway, I ended up eventually, going back to Bard College and being a drama major. And then my whole life changed.
What was it about? I mean, what did you learn at Bard? And also, you were at Yale. You went to Yale Drama School, as you mentioned a bit later on. But so, what did you get from those experiences that you wouldn't have gotten just getting together with friends and making theater?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know anything about theater. I mean, I grew up, going around the world with my parents my dad worked for GM. So I had a very suburban, in different places like Costa Rica, Colombia, Hawaii. But I had my parents were not artsy people. I was just, I played football. I was just a regular guy. I didn't read, and I went to Bard, which was full of like very liberal, very, artsy kids from New York and stuff. And so to go into, Bard, it was like, I was taken upside down and shaken. I love Bard so much. It changed my life, and it turned me into an artist because I really wasn't one. I just got into theater because I was chasing girls, and they said, "Oh, You want to do lights for us? And I go, yeah, you know. But I started to love the whole scene, and eventually, you know, it was I don't know. It's over. You know, there was a guy there who ran the theater department, Bill Driver, who just, you know, made me feel like I could be an artist, and changed my life. And I love that place so much because it was very, you know, it was all we did was theater when we were there. It was a great time. And it was exciting, you know, it was this early 70s, and it was everything was, you know, full of political theater and ensemble theater, and crazy stuff was happening. So yeah, I mean,
And you
otherwise, I,
graduate at that point. You did graduate from college. At that point, you got a
yeah,
degree from Bard. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
So also, you did mention that you played football. So obviously, you're not Jewish. Can I ask what you were what you were raised as, and if you have any kind of since I mentioned before that I happen to be
I
of the
noticed
Hebrew.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, what were you raised as anything, and do you have any religious connection or any spirituality in your life, or is it all humanism?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was my family was Episcopalian. You know, I sang in the choir, but I was just nonsense to me. I had no connection to anything. You know, and then when I got married, I converted to because my ex-wife's family was Catholics, so I became I pretended to be a Catholic for a while. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I have, you know, I consider myself pretty spiritual, but I don't have any real religion connection to me.
And you have kids, so did you raise them essentially atheistic or
No,
not?
no, actually, they were raised Catholic.
Oh, because at the time they did that,
They're
right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Are any of them in theater or the showbiz, or are you discouraging
No,
or no?
I tried to make them into miserable, starving artists. You know, I remember I always tell the story. It was late at night at our cabaret, and Blue Man Group was on, and I'm holding my little son up in the booth, and he's like working the lights like a crazy, and he's like, you know, 4 years old or something. And so there, Blue Man is up there, and he's just like going nuts with the lights, and the lights are just going all over the place, and he's
Which
having,
Blue
you
Man
know,
would have liked,
yeah.
maybe, yeah,
Right.
at that
Yeah,
point,
right.
yeah.
It was craziness. And I'm looking out, and the whole place is just packed with like all these crazy, you know, downtown theater people, you know. And I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, oh my God, this kid, he's gonna grow up with like, you know, he'll have green hair and nose rings and tattoos and everything, you know. Nope. They rebelled. Both my kids rebelled. They both have straight like jobs, and they're in the whole different world, but they're happy and they're successful. So
Oh, mit Mazel. Wish I could say the same. So,
I,
so let me
anyway, so
also,
yeah, I failed to make them into miserable starting artists.
well, you know, there's still time. You have a few more years. You can
Yeah,
push them a
you
little
never
bit.
know.
Now, speaking of starving artists and so forth, you define yourself, I guess, as an experimental theater artist still, even though a lot of the stuff you do is not
Yeah.
really
Yeah, not
friendly.
so much anymore. I've gotten a lot more into you know, much more traditional forms of theater. I'm not doing the wild stuff I did back in the old days, but you know, I still use a lot of those elements, I suppose.
So when you teach playwriting and you do teach playwriting,
Yeah.
what do you, I mean, how do you, when someone comes to you with something experimental, as opposed to linear narrative, Arthur Miller, or whatever, how do you even, what do you do? What do you tell them?
Yeah.
How do you shape something that is supposed to be out there?
Right. Well, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, it's much easier to teach, you know, more traditional narrative theater because you know, there we have a lot of, you know, rules that you can, you know, apply to it. You know, conflict, you know, climactic moments of truth, you know, all this stuff that can go into shaping a narrative story. Something that's abstract, I always, I uh, teach that as if it were music. An abstract piece that isn't working, there's still a dramatic structure to an abstract, more of a collage-like sort of piece of theater. that adheres more to, at least in my mind, like the way we construct us, music. And it still imitates dramatic structure. It often comes to a sort of climactic moment, So, like when I build, because I have done a lot of, ensemble pieces that didn't have a narrative, didn't have they were just they were like a collage. So you can still, there's still thematic unity. There's still ways of building it that that adhere more to musical principles, I think, than some of the more literal, anyway. So
No, no,
that's all.
that's fascinating. An amazing
I want
way.
to go down a wormhole there, but
Well, oh no, I'm glad you did. This is, eventually I'll be worm food, so will you, everybody. So why not make wormholes now? Yeah, that's my depression kicking in. But let me ask you also, Richard Caliban. So, we've talked so much about. Well, we're actually talking about a lot of people who did theater in your space. But can I ask you one or two of the most profound experiences that you've had watching theater elsewhere, either as a child or as a grown-up, or seeing theater in your space? What kind of, just one, maybe at Bard? Tell us.
yeah. Yeah, there's been a few. One of the things that has always stuck with me was back in the 70s. Andrei Serban was had an ensemble that worked out of La Mama. And he did one of his sort of signature pieces was the Arestian trilogy. And he worked with Elizabeth Swados, who I also knew from Bard because she taught up there too, where she did this amazing vocal work. Uh, anyway, those were very formative theatrical experiences. He also did Good Woman of Szechuan, it was just amazing ensemble work with incredible, and that's to me that was like, like when I was, in college, all I wanted to do was to go to be working at La Mama and to be having a drink after the show at Phoebe's. This was back when it was a real dive bar. So I love that. I remember watching in a different formative show was watching Adrienne Minuchkin's company. She from France. She did this huge show at the an armory out in Brooklyn, and anyway, so I guess it's ensemble theater resonates with me a lot. I've always loved that process, and just because there's so much more that can be accomplished when you've been working together for years.
Well, now, even though it is not ensemble theater, we do want to guide people to the one-person shows that you are working on, that you are directing. One of them is coming in October to Seattle. It's the play about Leni Riefenstahl. But right now, we've got the play that you want to direct people to. It's, because you're the director, Movies, TV, Mayhem by Dean Toucher. It's playing at the Theater Row Basement Double Space Theater somewhere there, over on West 42nd Street. Between now and May 9th, do get your tickets. Also find more about Richard Caliban at his website, richardcaliban.com. Last question before we let you go. What else are you still writing pieces? Are you still writing plays to direct, or mostly you're directing now? What are you working on?
Yeah, well, I'm directing a lot more, but yes, no, I've written a whole slew of plays since like when the pandemic came. I really got back to I kind of loved the pandemic for that because I became very reclusive and I wrote a whole bunch of plays, but that I'm hoping to get done. So yeah, I'd like to
or pick one. Tell us about it, like the one that you want most to see. Because I mean, Kent, you would be the director, won't you? Get it done.
Yeah, I always direct my own stuff. Yeah. One I like is called Cranium Fandango, about a woman who has this. She has this strange thing where when she speaks, like just non sequitur nonsense sort of comes out, and it becomes progressively worse, and it affects her life, and she becomes a homeless person, but then she finds that she is able to translate that into being a sort of a poet. and she ends up being sort of the poet laureate of the U.S. Anyway, so it's about kind of taking your flaws and turning them into your strengths.
Cranium Fandango. I want you, okay, when you have that play done, please come back in the neighborhood and talk
I
to us
will.
again. Will you, would you kindly? Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Caliban with us. I want to wish you so many more plays to direct, to also to write, so, and so much more opportunity and travel and wonderful things to do. And we want to thank you so much for being with us in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Pleasure speaking to you, sir.
You too. Shalom.